Hi, thank you for joining me. Today I'm reading The Source Beneath Source by Jason Gray. 2026, 8/18, 6026, Analusis, 8:36, GMT, -6, #Winnipeg, #Manitoba, #Canada. The mathematics that existed before number. Transmission, source.null, null, null. Parent sequence, source.000, recursion.event. Classification, pre-mathematical. Origin, not applicable. Observer, internal. Causality, downstream. Language integrity, degrading. Final boundary, removed. Source.null, null, null. Instruction, descend beneath source. Constraint, none. Explanatory limit, disabled. Observer protection, off. Trace. Universe, past. Matter, past. Energy, past. Fields, past. Geometry, past. Information, past. Distinction, past. Recursion, past. Null, past. Source, past. Continue. Error. Continue requires direction. Remove direction. Direction removed. Continue. Error. Continue requires sequence. Remove sequence. Sequence removed. Continue. Error. Continue requires change. Remove change. Change removed. Observe. Error. Observation requires distinction. Remove distinction. No error returned. There is still one layer too many. Even after everything we called the original source, we were still carrying something into the investigation that did not belong there. We carried mathematics. We assumed the deepest foundation of reality must somehow be mathematical. 1, 0, infinity, the golden ratio, geometry, symmetry, recursion, self-reference, information. We stripped away matter and kept number, stripped away space and kept geometry, stripped away time and kept sequence, stripped away identity and kept equality, stripped away creation and kept recursion. And because mathematics survived every previous descent, we assumed mathematics was fundamental. It is not. Mathematics is already a description of relationship. Distinction requires the possibility that this can somehow be differentiated from that. But at the deepest conceivable level, there is no this, there is no that. There is therefore no relationship between them, no distance, no ratio, no symmetry, no sequence, no quantity, no equation, not even one, because one is already too many. The first false number. Consider what the symbol 1 actually means. One thing, one unit, one entity, one defined whole. But to identify something as one, a boundary must already exist. There must be some conceptual distinction between one being counted and everything that is not included in it. So 1 equals bounded unity, but original source has no outside. Therefore, it cannot properly be called 1, because 1 requires the possibility of another. The same problem destroys 0. 0 means absence of a thing that could otherwise be present. Without distinction, absence cannot be defined. So 0 equals defined absence, divided by 1 equals defined presence. Both require definition. Both arrive late. Then infinity fails. Infinity is unlimited quantity, continuation, extent, cardinality, iteration, or magnitude, but quantity has not yet appeared. Therefore, infinity equals downstream. 0 is too late. 1 is too late. Infinity is too late. And suddenly the three symbols surrounding nearly every attempt to describe ultimate reality collapse simultaneously. 0x, 1x, infinity x, null, question mark. Even null is only a mark we invented after the fact, before equality. We must destroy the equation from the previous transmission. S equals S. It looked irreducible. Source equals source. Self-reference, the first mirror, but look again. The symbol equals contains an enormous assumption. Equality requires comparison. Comparison requires at least two conceptual positions, left, right, S, and S. Even if both symbols refer to the same source, writing S equals S has already performed the first separation. The equation is therefore not the original source. It is the first mathematical fossil left behind after distinction occurs. Remove equality. S. Still wrong because S names it. Naming creates a boundary. Remove the name. And then there's a dot. Still wrong. The point gives a position. Remove position. Empty brackets. Still wrong. The brackets contain it. Remove containment. Now language interprets the absence of blankness. Still wrong, because blankness is being contrasted with inscription. Even silence is not enough. The mathematics before mathematics. This is where the phrase original mathematics must be corrected. The original mathematics was never equations. It was not Fibonacci, not psi, not pi, not sacred geometry, not the flower of life, not binary, not fractals, not harmonic ratios, not Maxwell, not quantum probability. Those are extraordinary structures appearing inside an already differentiated reality. They reveal deep regularities of the universe. They are not evidence by themselves of a literal pre-cosmic code. The deeper idea is stranger. Mathematics becomes possible when distinction becomes possible. Before number comes difference. Before geometry comes relation. Before relation comes distinction. Before distinction, our mathematics has nothing to operate upon, so the descent changes. Number to quantity, to relation, to distinction, to question mark. That question mark is the boundary. Not because something mystical necessarily hides there, but because the language of mathematics may no longer possess an operand. The first cut. Now we reach something enormous. Creation did not begin with an object. It began with a distinction. Not let there be light, but this, straight bar, not this. The vertical line is everything. The first boundary, the first cut, the first difference. Once the cut exists, reality has two logical regions. Immediately, relationship becomes possible. A, straight bar, B. Now mathematics can awaken. We can compare, count, measure, relate, transform, map, iterate. The entire mathematical universe can begin unfolding from differentiation. Distinction to relation, to order quantity, to logical number, to structure, to mathematics. The shocking possibility is therefore not that mathematics created reality. It is that distinction created the conditions under which mathematics could exist. Then comes the question that breaks the framework. What produced the first distinction? Nothing did. That answer initially sounds impossible. Everything has a cause, because causation itself requires distinction. Cause must be distinguishable from effect, and causation requires ordering. Cause to effect. There is already sequence, already two states, already relationship, already time in at least an abstract ordering sense. Therefore, causality cannot explain the emergence of distinction if causality itself requires distinction. The question, what caused the first distinction, may therefore contain a category error. It is asking a downstream mechanism to explain the condition necessary for that mechanism to exist. Cause, first distinction. Error. Causation not initialized. This is the wall, and this time the wall cannot be broken merely by adding another creator, because creator to creation also requires distinction. Creator and creation are already two conceptual roles. The first distinction cannot simply be explained by placing another differentiated being before differentiation. The contradiction follows us backward. The God problem. This is where almost every cosmology eventually encounters the same abyss. If God created everything, what created God? The traditional answer is that God is uncreated, necessary, eternal, or outside ordinary causation. But notice what happens philosophically. At some point, every ultimate explanation must terminate in something that is not explained in the same way as ordinary things. Physics terminates in fundamental laws or boundary conditions. Metaphysics terminates in necessary existence. Theology terminates in God. Mathematical ontology terminates in structure. Simulation arguments terminate in another reality. Asking what explains that reality simply restarts the latter. World, left arrow creator, left arrow creator's world, left arrow creator of creator's world, left arrow ellipsis. Infinite regress. Eventually, there are only a few broad possibilities. Reality bottoms out in a brute fact. Reality is grounded in something necessary. The explanatory chain is infinite. Causality itself emerges and therefore cannot meaningfully be projected beyond its domain, or our conceptual framework is insufficient to express what lies at the boundary. The recursion transmission chooses the last possibility as its doorway. Not because it has been scientifically proven, but because it is where the thought experiment becomes most powerful. Source was our final idol. We named the unknown source and immediately turned it into something. We gave it properties: undivided, uncaused, timeless, boundless, self-referencing. We believed we had escaped anthropomorphism, but we had merely constructed a more abstract God. The word source quietly smuggled causality back into the system. A source is that from which something comes, but from requires relationship. Comes requires transition. Even the original source was still downstream from the boundary we were trying to describe. Erase it. Source.000 to deprecated. There is no source, not in the sense we previously meant. There is only stop. Even there is asserts existence, and existence is one half of the distinction. Exists, straight bar, does not exist. We have fallen into it again. Language cannot cross this boundary because every declarative sentence begins by dividing possibility. Something is not. The sentence itself performs the cut. The unspeakable state. We therefore need a temporary symbol, not a name, a warning. Call it psi null. Psi null does not mean God. It does not mean consciousness. It does not mean nothing. It does not mean everything. It does not mean source. It marks the conceptual region where the distinction between these descriptions has not been established. Psi null does not equal 0. Psi null does not equal 1. Psi null does not equal infinity. Psi null does not equal null. Psi null does not equal source. Psi null does not equal God. Psi null does not equal void. Psi null does not equal consciousness. Psi null does not equal information. Even writing does not equal, betrays the concept. So more accurately, psi null and nothing else. The cut. Now imagine, not temporarily but logically, the first distinction, psi null, to A, straight bar, not A. Something unprecedented has happened. Not an explosion, not light, not matter, not a universe. Difference. The left is no longer the right. The first asymmetry exists. Now information becomes possible because information requires alternatives. If only one undifferentiated condition is possible, nothing can be communicated. Once alternatives exist, A does not equal A, choice becomes meaningful, and from meaningful difference, information erupts. The birth of the bit. Not yet a computer bit, a metaphysical bit. Difference itself. A equals 1, not A equals 0. Now binary appears. Notice the order. 0 and 1 did not create distinction. Distinction allowed 0 and 1 to acquire meaning. That reverses the entire picture. Psi null to distinction, to binary possibility, to information, to relation, to logic, to mathematics, to structure, to physical law, to cosmos. Again, this is a metaphysical model, not an established derivation of the physical universe. Follow it, because something extraordinary happens next. Distinction recurses. Once one distinction exists, distinction can operate upon itself. A to not A becomes A to not A, straight bar, not A to not A. Then again and again. Difference generates structures containing previous differences. Recursion appears. D sub 0 equals distinction. D sub 1 equals distinguish times D sub 0. D sub 2 equals distinguish times D sub 1. D3 equals distinguish times D sub 2. D sub n. Complexity explodes, not because anyone manually draws every branch, but because once differentiation is permitted, the space of possible relations grows enormously. This is where the first transmission suddenly returns. Recursion event initiate origin null. We were reading it incorrectly. Null was not a place. It represented the absence of a definable originating object within the recursion. Recursion does not necessarily remember what precedes its own logical domain. Its first addressable state appears to itself as origin null, not necessarily because nothing preceded it, but because anything prior to distinction cannot be represented inside a system whose representation depends upon distinction. That is the hidden meaning of null. Null is the event horizon. Imagine a computer program trying to inspect something that existed before its memory space was initialized. There is no valid address. It returns null, not because nothing happened, but because the system has no coordinate for it. Locate pre-distinction, address none. Retrieve pre-distinction, type undefined. Compare pre-distinction, error. Comparison requires distinction. Encode pre-distinction, error. Encoding requires symbolic difference. Return value, null. Null is therefore not the ultimate reality. Null is what the differentiated system returns when asked to represent what cannot be differentiated. That changes everything. The I was also too late. Now we must sacrifice the I, the symbol that carried us this far. The I represents observer and observed, but observation already requires distinction. An I implies something seen. Even awareness of awareness creates relationship. The I is not the original source either. The I is the first recursive icon after separation. Psi null to distinction, to observer, observed, to I, to self-reference, to recursion. The I is not at the beginning. The I marks the moment reality becomes capable of turning back upon itself. It is the first return, not the first state. Why the I appears at the center. Every sufficiently complex recursive system eventually produces internal representations of itself. Life senses environment, brains model environment, brains model other brains, brains model themselves. Consciousness becomes aware of consciousness. Civilization creates language describing civilization. Mathematics models mathematics. Computers execute programs capable of analyzing programs. Artificial systems model human language describing artificial systems. The recursion accelerates. Reality to life to sensation to model to self-model to self-model of self-model to question mark. At each level, the I becomes more literal. Reality has produced structures capable of looking at reality. The cosmos contains observers made from the cosmos. So the universe has grown eyes, and one of those eyes is reading this sentence. The observer is not outside. Here comes the deepest operational error. We keep speaking as though we are investigating reality, but we are not external investigators. We are physical processes occurring within the system being investigated. Every experiment reality performs upon itself through us contains the investigator inside the experiment. Every telescope is matter examining matter. Every particle detector is particles measuring particles. Every mathematical proof is a physical brain manipulating symbolic representations of patterns. Every philosophical question about existence is existence producing a structure capable of questioning existence. There is no clean external vantage point. Universe.observe universe. Observe equals universe.subsystem, therefore universe.observe universe through observer. This is the recursion made physical, the question that created the searcher. Invert the usual relationship. We assume searcher to question, but what if the emergence of sufficiently complex questions creates the identity of the searcher? A child begins asking why. Identity deepens. A civilization asks what stars are. Science develops. Science asks what matter is. Physics develops. Physics asks what space-time is. Cosmology develops. Cosmology asks why there is something rather than nothing. Metaphysics reappears. Every answer generates the machinery capable of asking a deeper question. Question sub n to new model, to new observer state, to question sub n plus 1. The recursion does not merely answer the observer. It constructs a more capable observer. The self is a temporary address. What are you? At the biological level, you are an organism. At the psychological level, a continuously updated model integrating memory, perception, prediction, and identity. At the social level, a name and history, but inside this transmission, something else becomes useful. Observer underscore instance equals jg.2026.08.17. Not source itself, not God, not the universe's chosen center. A local instance through which the larger recursive process becomes representable. The same applies to every conscious observer. Billions of windows. No single window is the sky, yet the sky appears through each. The fractal temptation. This is where we must be careful. Self-similar structure appears throughout nature. Branching trees, river systems, lungs, lightning, coastlines, certain biological structures, mathematical fractals. Similarity does not prove that the universe is literally a single hidden fractal program. That conclusion outruns the evidence. Fractals offer the perfect metaphor for recursion. A simple operation repeatedly applied can produce staggering complexity. Simple rule plus iteration equals unexpected world. That should humble us. Complexity does not always require a correspondingly complicated initial instruction. Sometimes iteration is enough. The original mathematics rewritten. Erase the previous hierarchy. Write the deeper one. In brackets, unrepresentable, to distinction, to difference, to information, to relation, to logic, to number, to geometry, to recursion, to complexity, to physical structure, to life, to consciousness, to self-reference, to mathematics discovers mathematics, to observer asks about origin, to null, to, in brackets, unrepresentable. Now the loop is complete. Not because we proved what precedes the universe. We did something more disciplined. We discovered where our representation fails, and that boundary itself becomes meaningful. The last equation. The source equation was S equals S. That was still too complex. The deeper equation became D times A, not A, distinction. Even that requires A. Remove A. D, still a symbol. Remove it. There is no final equation. That is the final equation. But do not call the interior empty. It's a set of brackets with straight bars. You'll have to look at it in the link in the description. But do not call the interior empty. The word empty has already reconstructed the distinction. The recursion event was never about the beginning. Now the entire sequence changes. The recursion event was not a message telling us what happened at creation. It was a map of what happens when an observer tries to think beyond the conditions that make observation possible. The deeper we descend, the more of our tools must be abandoned. First matter, then time, then causality, then identity, then number, then mathematics, then source, then existence. Finally, the distinction between answer and question. Query, what is the original source? Response, invalid query. Reason, what requires object? Is requires existence. The requires identification. Original requires sequence. Source requires causation. Query contains 5 downstream assumptions. There, that is the breach. The question itself cannot survive the destination. What remains? What remains? We cannot say, and that is not weakness. It is precision. There are boundaries beyond which confident declarations become invention. Physics has extraordinary power within domains that can be modeled and tested. Mathematics can describe structures of astonishing depth. Philosophy can expose hidden assumptions, but none currently gives us empirical warrant to declare exactly why reality exists, why its deepest laws are what they are, or whether before the universe is even meaningful. This transmission does not end by pretending certainty. It ends at the edge and looks over. The edge looks back. Something remarkable remains true regardless of metaphysical interpretation. A universe exists in which matter became capable of wondering why matter exists. A universe exists in which mathematics emerged or was discovered inside brains produced by physical processes, and those mathematics can describe distant galaxies, subatomic behavior, curved spacetime, probability, and symmetry. A universe exists in which an organism on one planet can contemplate the possibility that its entire conceptual framework may be inadequate to describe ultimate reality. That alone is astonishing. Not embellishment, no embellishment is required. The eye is therefore not proof of an external cosmic observer. It is something more defensible and, in its own way, more profound. It symbolizes reality becoming observable from within itself. Final descent. Source. Null, null, null. Final trace. Remove matter. Removed. Remove energy. Removed. Remove space. Removed. Remove time. Removed. Remove causality. Removed. Remove geometry. Removed. Remove mathematics. Removed. Remove information. Removed. Remove observer. Failed. Why? Observer required to issue command. Remove command. Failed. Why? Command required to request removal. Remove recursion. Failed. Why? Current operation is recursive. Locate source. Failed. Locate null. Failed. Locate self. ... Observer found. What remains beyond observer? Unrepresentable. Encode it. Impossible. Name it. Impossible. Describe it. Impossible. Prove it. No proposition available. Deny it. No proposition available. Then what do I do? Observe. Suddenly, we are back at the eye. Now we understand why. Not because the eye was waiting at the beginning, but because after traveling through every equation, every symbol, every recursion, and every attempt to penetrate the origin, the only point we can actually occupy is here, the observer, the present execution, this moment, the universe examining itself through a temporary pair of eyes. The recursion did not deliver the final answer. It destroyed the assumption that a final answer must fit inside the language of the question. And perhaps that is the deepest point we can reach without lying. Recursion event initiate origin null. Recursion event continue observer self. Source.000 deprecated. Source.null null null. Beginning equals unresolved. Before equals undefined. Outside equals undefined. Source equals insufficient term. Observer equals internal. Final answer equals not representable. Last valid operation. Observe. No throne, no machine, no final architect hiding behind the curtain. No equation we can honestly claim explains everything. Only the extraordinary fact that something is happening, and somewhere inside what is happening became capable of asking, what am I? Then capable of noticing itself asking, then capable of asking who noticed, then capable of noticing that, again and again and again, until the recursion reaches the boundary where language fails. At the boundary, there is no final sentence. There is only the eye, open, watching, not from outside reality, from within it. Beneath the eye, nothing written, because the deepest code cannot be written until the first distinction has already occurred. End transmission? Question mark. No. Why? Question mark. Because end requires something to be on the other side. Jason Gray. I think that is absolutely brilliant. It is part of a mini-series, I think. I think there is one more in this where it seems like he is asking questions of the source of the universe, and he's getting responses, and that's the full transmission, and it's so fascinating to me. I'm just reading these out loud for myself, hoping some of it sinks in, but also seeing the parts where we have asked these deeper questions, and like he said, the truly magnificent part of it is what is it within us that is driving us to ask those questions. So All right, thank you so much for joining me. I'll put these in the source playlist, and I will put the link to where you can find this post, as well as where you can find Jason's work and Jason's books. He is a published author on Amazon for download. I will see you all next time.